Senior Medical Officer, and Dr. Anisa Sayad ma'am, Medical Officer. May I also thank very dynamic Dr. Vinod Khade sir for his efforts in initiating and establishing this research committee. This research committee was formed by sole intention of being a supportive unit to postgraduates pursuing various specialty degrees in our hospital. Members of this committee are Dr. Vinod Khade, Dr. Mamta Lala, Dr. Dipti Chauhan, Dr. Swapnil Keni, Dr. Kalpana Arora, and Dr. Smita Krishnamurthy. This committee aims to conduct at least one academic program a month in near future for benefit of our residents and teaching staff of this hospital. Today's talk is on presentation skills for medical postgraduates by our very own, very learned, very intelligent, knowledgeable, with great surgical skills, Dr. Swapnil Keni sir. Currently, he is a senior consultant and DNB teacher at Department of Orthopedics, KB Bhabha Hospital. Previously, he has worked as an associate professor and unit chief at Sir JJ Group of Hospitals, Mumbai. Sir has pursued his medical education from TN Medical College, followed by KM Hospital, Mumbai. Sir has various fellowships from very prestigious institutes all over the world, I can say. He has invasive pediatric spine fellowship, pediatric orthopedic fellowship, adult spine reconstruction fellowship. He has been an executive council member of Bombay Orthopedic Society, and he is an honorable secretary of Bombay Orthopedic Society till date. Sir has many publications in national and international journals. I am sure it will be a great pleasure to hear him today. Over to you, sir. Let's welcome Dr. Swapnil Keni, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Riri. That was indeed a wonderful introduction and probably much more than what I deserve. Any which ways, let's get to the topic for today. Something which is very close to my heart, essentially. And this is about presentation skills. And one of the reasons why it is close to my heart is probably because there was nobody during our times who could teach what a scientific presentation is and how it has to be presented. Probably because these were soft skills which did not really have any sort of a institutional or a scholastic training. Things have changed today. As we have learned the art of presentation, we've also understood the nuances of it. Essentially, scientific presentation, scientific publication, speaking or presenting a case, there are a lot of similarities and differences. The similarities are that you definitely get to speak, you get to present to people, you have an interaction, and you get a feedback. And this is so similar to presenting a case. It is so similar to appearing for a practical exam. Now, to simplify a scientific presentation, one really needs to understand what your audience is, what they wish for, and what is it that they are looking to take away from your presentation. But before getting there, you first have to understand the science of presentation. And to understand the science of presentation, one really needs to get into the psyche of a presenter. Most of the times when we are presenting a paper, when we are presenting a presentation, when we are presenting a case, we are kind of surrounded by a lot of fear, a lot of apprehension. And this apprehension, unfortunately, lets us to lose a lot of belief and a lot of faith in ourselves. And essentially, what I believe is that the difference between average and good, good and great and phenomenal is the mindset. So before you sit on your computer, the first thing you need to tweak is your mind, is your brain. And unless you do that, you cannot move ahead. Now, the second thing which you need to do, and this all starts in the mind, before you actually put your pen to paper or you put your fingers on the computer, the first thing which is extremely important is you have to set your goals really high. And when you set your goals ridiculously high, even if you fail, you'll always fail above everybody else's success. And this is something which James Cameron said. He's the guy who made Titanic. And you know the kind of efforts which go in to even conceptualize a movie like Titanic. He not only set his goals high, but he also knew that he could fail. But even if he failed, it would always be above somebody else's success. So this is essentially the mindset with which you start a presentation. And believe me, when you're doing a presentation, when you're into it, right from the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end, it's never about beating the next guy. It's never about, similarly in an exam, it's never about beating the next candidate. It is essentially about being in your own league. If you ask somebody who gets a gold medal or who is doing very, very well while presenting a case, they will tell you that they are in that particular zone, in that particular league of their own. And only when you're in that league of your own can you excel. When you're not thinking of others, but thinking of yourself, that is when you can pass others. Not only pass, you can surpass them in a big way. And just like everything in science, everything else in science, presentation skills also has a science to it. There is a science of input, there is a science of the process, and there is a science of output. Now, as regards the science of input, before you actually start to do a presentation, to make a presentation, you need to start to plan it. And planning starts not only from your thoughts, but it starts from a lot of things. The first thing what it starts from is probably the way you are going to decide how you're going to dress on that particular day. Now, I know that this may sound extremely trivial, but unless you imagine yourself in those circumstances, on that stage, wherein that particular, those particular clothes, presenting to the audience in that particular manner, with confidence and self-belief, you cannot reach there. So your imagination starts from the day you start presenting, but it should go on to that particular day. It should finally lead to the day when you're going to actually be presenting. Now, fashion may mean different things to different people. We all know that. But elegance is an acquired trait. So whenever you are going to have to do a presentation in a conference, in a meeting, see to it that you are dressed elegantly, simply, not necessarily in a suit, but essentially something which is appealing, something which is not demeaning. Now, this is something which I've come across as an examiner many times about the casual attitude of many people. They do not dress properly, their footwear is not right, their aprons are not well ironed, they are reasonably dirty, and they don't kind of look into, the way you need to present yourself. Each day you present yourself when you need to go for an exam, when you need to go for a presentation, or for anything else in life, you should always look presentable, right? So it is extremely important that you plan to be presentable before you actually start your presentation. We all know that this is the webinar dress code for today and nowadays, but this is something which we need to avoid eventually. Now, if you look into medical schools per se, there is a particular bell curve which all the students follow. There are a few who are really excellent. They are beyond. Most of them are people who are, average, or they fall within average. And there are a few backbenchers. Many of them end up taking orthopedics, I feel. So those are the kind of, students which are there. But, the same thing cannot be extrapolated to high performance people. This bell curve is not true. Why I'm trying to say this is because just because you have not been the best student in the class, just because people have beaten you at it, just because you've not got a distinction, doesn't mean that your life doesn't have any meaning or your life will not take the correct path. So trust me, if I can do it, anybody else can. And hence, I always believe that high performance or people who reach places need not be those who excel at academics and academics only. So one really needs to think, then what is it that makes somebody from good to great, from great to excellent, and from excellent to class? And the only thing which makes people as champions is basically lucidity of thought process. The more lucid and more simple your thought process, the higher you will go. And this is true anywhere in life. May it be presentations, may it be a surgery, may it be a procedure, may it be dealing with a difficult patient, or may it be administrative responsibilities. Unless you have a very lucid, clear-cut way of thinking, you cannot really proceed in life. Now let's look at something called as a mind map. Now, those of you who have younger children, I'm pretty sure that the teachers speak about something called as a mind map, right? And what exactly is a mind map? A mind map is a way or a method by which you try and simplify a complex formula or a complex system into various simplistic systems. And if you look at a mind map per se, it will remind you of something like a disorganized slideshow, right? So this is about getting your slideshow together. This is about getting your slides together. And when you start to make a presentation, and when you start to get that slideshow together, first in your mind and then on your computer, there are three things which are very important. All three of them need to be uncomplicated in a way by which a rational brain, a wise mind, and an emotional heart can amalgamate so that you have a clarity and a completely lucid and clear thought process. And what is extremely important before you start making a presentation is an extensively written, detailed manuscript. Once you have your manuscript, you can tweak it, you can make it shorter, you can make it longer. It may be on paper, it may be on the computer, whichever way it is. If you have the entire manuscript, for example, if you're going to present your thesis, and if you have your entire manuscript with you, making a presentation is going to be a cakewalk. The second thing which is very important and which I always insist is that your literature has to be exhaustive. Now, it is extremely unfortunate that people search Google and only pick up the first 3 articles which are available to them, which have full text, which unfortunately may not be PubMed indexed, but they do not really go into the depth. And believe me, the devil actually lies in the detail. So unless you go to the relevant article, which is exhaustively searched with references, you will not make a good presentation. Not only that, you will not even be able to answer the questions which are put to you, because your audience is probably going to be more learned, more educated, more experienced than you are. And when that is so, they will always have questions which you probably have not anticipated. And hence, an exhaustively searched literature is extremely important and needs to be kept handy when you're making a presentation. The third and most important thing, and this is specifically when you have a lot of data, is to have a comprehensive Excel sheet. Now, Excel sheets per se look extremely boring, but the way to make them interesting is to try and color code them. And what happens in a color coded Excel sheet is that people like orthopedic surgeons who think from their biceps rather than from their brain will also understand that this color code means something, this color code means something. And eventually, when they pick up their color codes, they will have specific data, quantitative and qualitative, in color-coded format. Picking up that data, putting it in formulas, making graphs becomes extremely easy. So the advantage of color coding is you get your data simply, you can apply formulas, you can make tables, which is very simple. You can construct diagrams, which are very simple. Now, the second part of the science of presentation is essentially the execution. And how do you execute it? So this is essentially about your own PowerPoint. So the first thing which I always suggest to everyone is that you need to have something called as an attention-seeking title. And let me take you back to probably the year 2002, 2003, when I had one of my mentors who at that time was a role model to me, wanting to present a case series of something called as posterior lumbar interbody fusion using something called as an interbody cage, which is essentially a metal device which you put inside the vertebral body, between 2 vertebral bodies. And he could have said a lot of things, blah, 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 PILIF using cages, this, that, he could have made it complicated. But he made it really simple. And you know what title he gave? His title simply said, cages are for monkeys. And that was something which actually sought the attention of the entire house. I mean, people were really floored by that kind of a title. So he had a monkey there sitting in a cage, and then he was showing his cases of spinal surgery. So this is essentially how you can make a complex thing look extremely simple. The second and most important thing is to attach taglines. And the idea of attaching taglines to a title is because people can start identifying with them. For example, we remember Utterly Butterly Delicious as a mool. And similarly, when we start using taglines, we can make our titles very, very appealing and very, very remembering. The third thing which a lot of people miss and which is very unfortunate is people use more text than words. And that is something that is very unfortunate because I personally believe that a picture can speak 1,000 words. And when we see this person on television every time saying Mitro, there is something which comes to our mind which may not make us very comfortable. Despite that, his picture speaks 1,000 words to us. The next most important thing is how you choose your slide template. Now look at this particular template, right? You need to really avoid using loud colors because they really make matters difficult for the people to read. Dull backgrounds need to be avoided completely. Now, this kind of a slide which is there gives a lot of information, but just look at the slide. There is a car behind, you can barely read. So avoid templates with background pictures. Now, this is a beautiful looking slide template. Unfortunately, there is barely any space to write anything. Hence, these designs are really, really only cosmetic, but not functional. Choosing the correct slide background and foreground is again a matter of debate. I wouldn't want to get into it. I will tell you what I do best is I try and choose something which doesn't have a low contrast, no contrast. I try and avoid contrasting colors in the same slide. I try and avoid distracting colors. So it's very simple for me. I use either a black, a white, or a gray. And these colors, which are kind of contrasting, they really look wonderful when you use it against a black, gray, or a white background. For example, a yellow, a green, magenta, cyan, and white. So these are 5 basic colors which you can actually use in your background, which will make and enhance your slideshow. Again, learning contrast is a matter of permutations and combinations. It's something for you to figure out. We can only suggest, but at the end of the day, it's up to you how you figure it out. Choosing fonts, extremely important. There are certain standard fonts. There are certain alternatives. So Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, Courier, these are standard fonts. You can use alternatives like Baskerville, Open Sans, Cantora 1, and Ubuntu. And then there are these kind of stylish fonts, which I would not recommend to people who are presenting papers. But once in a while, when you have present a lecture or you're presenting a short case series, you're doing an interdepartmental meeting, and you really want to make it a little interesting in the afternoon and not put people to sleep, then you can use something like this, these stylish kind of fonts, or even artistic fonts for that matter. Now, what is really important is your font size. And your font size needs to be reasonably large for people to read. So anything below 24 is extremely difficult, even for a young audience. Anything below 32 is difficult for the standard audience of a presentation, which is essentially people who are above the age of 40. So anything between 36 and about 60 is something which you're looking at, and don't try and go beneath that because that is going to be a problem. So title about 96, author about 48, headings about 36, and text maybe 24, but I would now say it's about 36. The next important thing is your slide layouts, and this is so important. Now, your slide layouts have to be minimalistic because this kind of information, when you put on a slide, no one is going to be able to read it, and hence nobody is going to get to know as to what your slide really is trying to convey. And hence try and be as minimalistic. Minimum, you can put it in a few jotted points. You can put it in the form of a flow chart, but please do not fill up your slides with theory. That really doesn't look good. Font sizes and fonts have to be really spaced out. Minimum information on every slide. You can include or increase the number of slides, but don't try and put too much information on one particular slide. because it really doesn't give any kind of information to the people. The third thing which you need to understand and learn is to structure your slide. So when you really want to give or teach some sort of a concept, the structure of your slide is very important. It should be something which conveys the information by itself without you really trying to speak about it. So even when you read one single word out of the entire slide, that should be good enough. So this is extremely important, that you structure your slide very well. The next part is about inserting media, and this is where a lot of people do basic blunders. This is something where you have to be really careful. And the most important thing here is you should try and avoid disclosing the patient's identity. We see so many people with wonderful looking slides, but unfortunately they gave up the patient's identity, and that is not correct. The second thing is about background objects, and this is so important when you're clicking a picture from your phone. So you need to understand that when you click your picture from a phone against a viewing box, you may sometimes get your phone camera or the back of your phone seen in this picture. And this is where you need to be very careful. The next thing is pictures which are uncropped. Now, if you look at this particular picture, you can see the clip of the viewing box. And that clip of the viewing box is again something which is a kind of a sore to the eye. And you really need to crop your pictures in a way that they look presentable like this, and they can then be used in your presentation. So be certain that you do not have any background objects, that you crop your pictures, and you do not give any sort of information. Optimal brightness and contrast, extremely important. And this is something which PowerPoint and Keynote both now have a solution to this, wherein these pictures can be sort of adjusted for brightness and contrast. Even if the primary picture which you have imported is not of a good contrast, you can still tweak it, you can still modify it, and you can still make it better. So format picture, you go to, and there you kind of format your picture, you adjust your sharpness, your brightness, your contrast, your saturation, your temperature, eventually come to something which looks good. Try and remove all sorts of background basic colors from it. Try and remove things which are not relevant to it, so that you get a picture which is reasonably presentable. The next thing is your videos, and this is where a lot of people have problems. I have seen people struggling with their videos, video not working, especially surgical videos, gait videos, and all sorts of videos which have any sort of clinical material. And what is really important is that, one, you have the entire video on your desktop. Similarly, when you're going for the presentation, if you're going to take a pen drive with you, you're going to take a hard disk with you, please have that video also uploaded along with your presentation. See to it that it is there. This is one way by which, despite it not working in your presentation, you will be able to play the video as a separate file. So always see to it that you're prepared with this. The second thing which you can do essentially is you should try and save your presentation as a PPTX and not a PPT. So PPTX is an embedded format which actually puts your video there. And even if do not have your video with you, you've traveled somewhere, you just have a pen drive or a hard drive, most of the times your videos will play. For people who use Keynote, and I don't really know how many of you do, so I per se use Keynote, which is the presentation software for the Mac. Keynote really doesn't have much of a problem. So when you put a video in Keynote, it gets embedded, and Keynote can be converted into a PowerPoint, but vice versa is not true. So a Keynote, if you're making a Keynote, then you don't really need to embed the video or save it in some other format. The best video formats I have found are these, but of them, the most comfortable with which I am is the MP4 format, for the simple reason is that it is a really condensed and a really light file. So it's something which gives a lot of information, but at the same time is not too heavy on your computer. So it prevents your presentation from hanging during your particular PowerPoint presentation on the podium. Inserting graphs. Now, a lot of people avoid putting graphs, but believe me, graphs is many a times the crux. It is probably the difference between an average and a mediocre, and a mediocre and an excellent presentation. And hence, you need to put graphs, especially when you're presenting your thesis or when you're presenting a particular paper. Now, in graphs, a few things are important. You should not try and cram too much of data in one particular graph because it really doesn't give you much information. The second is you need to avoid a lot of annotations because these annotations again are something which people will not be able to read when your slide is going to be there only for less than 10 seconds. The third thing is you try and put in more representative charts with bright and contrasting colors, which are self-explanatory to a large extent. And when you do something like this, it makes a lot of sense to the audience who's actually looking at your presentation. What I tend to do is use something called as interactive graphs. Now, this is something which is only available on the Mac with numbers, but it is excellent because it really gives you the value of things in time. So I can really move this graph and this looks like an animation. It really looks cool. And this is something which has really helped me out and bailed me out in a lot of instances. So interactive graphs, again, if you're using the MacBook, and I would definitely recommend that people who are looking to buy a new computer, especially those who are in the medical fraternity related to orthopedics or other subspecialties, do think of investing in a MacBook. It is probably something you'll never regret doing. So definitely, yes, I do not have the shares of Apple, but I can still vouch for them because I've been using Mac since 2007. Right, a lot of advantages and it's a seamless platform. Now, the last part of it is the delivery. It is the day you stand in front of that audience. It is the day you perform. And you need to understand that when you are a performer on stage, you need to perform like a pro. So you've done your homework, you've done all the hard work, but now is the time that you really need to put everything what you have, what we call in the cricket lingo as the kitchen sink. You give everything you have in the output, heart, mind, and soul. That is what is important when you stand on stage. And to understand that, you need to know what the 3 Ks are. And the 3 Ks essentially are you need to know your objective, what do you want to do? You need to know your audience, and you also need to know what sort of a message you're going to deliver. Your objectives could be winning a prize or a medal. It could be just to wow your audience and establish your credentials or reiterate them as an academician, right? And this is essentially important to understand before you actually start your presentation. So a day before the presentation, in your mind, you decide what do you want to do. Do you want to just present, blabber, and step off? Or do you want to make a difference? If you make one difference, this one difference is going to multiply. It is going to kind of go into a compounding, and that is what is going to make you the winner. The next thing is probably about winning a prize or a medal. And whenever you are kind of competing in a competitive session, there should be nothing less and nothing else in your mind other than trying to win that prize and medal. Only when you're aiming for something that high would you sometimes probably fail, but you won't feel bad that you failed because you at least tried. So what is really important when you're trying to go for winning a medal or a prize is you need to finish and start your presentation in time. Put lesser slides, lesser matter on slides. Underline, highlight important points which are read by the audience and the judges who are sitting. Your videos have to work flawlessly. You need to check, counter check, and recheck. Your videos just have to work. There is no way they can't work. If they don't work, it is unfortunate. It is not that it is the mistake of the person who's in charge of the audio visual, but it is your mistake because you need to kind of take up the responsibility at some point in time. Representative charts, as I said, only one per slide. Don't cram data. You have to have a very clear conclusion and your relevance needs to be defined. Any and every study has a particular conclusion and a particular relevance. It should make people understand what you're trying to convey simpler. It should not complicate matters, it should simplify them. And hence your conclusion and relevance need to be defined. And last but not the least, your message has to be a clear cut take home message. That is so important. What has the audience taken back from you? Is there something which will make a difference to their practice? Is it something which will make a difference to the lives of their patients? Is it something that is going to make a difference to their surgical skills, their clinical skills, their skills as academicians? All these things need to be defined, need to be told in the form of a take home message. Last but not the least, please remember that when you're on stage, you are a performer. You are equal to anybody else who's performing on a screen or who's performing in a drama or a play. So your job is essentially also to wow your audience, right? And the way to wow them is to give a seamless talk without breaks or confusions. You use your slide transitions and animations in a very judicious manner, not to use them very regularly, but to use them at the right places and at the right points. Using pictures, diagrams, and self-explanatory charts, which is going to differentiate you from the others. Eye contact with audience, extremely important. I am not saying keep looking at them all the time, but try and have some sort of eye contact with your audience, because that is going to give you a lot of cues. Most importantly, asking questions and seeking consensus. So always try and address a question. Try and seek consensus from the audience. It can be in the form of ARS, that is an audience response system. It can be in the form of asking people to raise hands. And once you do that, you are with your audience. When you're with your audience and your audience is not asleep, your chances of success are much, much higher. You also need to establish your credentials as an academician. Hence, you need to present original work. Please do not take your friend's thesis and present it, because that is not original work is. You need to speak with a lot of command and authority, but do not ever reflect arrogance. And there is a very fine line between the two of them. And eventually, as you learn to speak, as you get better and better at it, you will know how to speak with command and authority. Most importantly, you need to preempt questions, because you are the person who's probably read this the most, your presentation. You have done your referencing. You have thought of the questions which have to be asked. And the questions, when they come from the audience and you have pre-thought about them, your answers will flow very, very simply, very, very lucidly. You need to be thoroughly updated with literature, as I reiterate again, because that is what is going to be asked regarding percentages, latest literature, relevant literature, and also literature with the highest level of evidence. You cannot quote a case series or a paper which really doesn't have high level of evidence, because that is not accepted in science, as all of us know. Most importantly, when you're asked questions, kindly be precise and avoid answering tangentially. This is something which I've seen again. The moment you do not know the answer to a question, you try and go tangentially. I think it is much better to either answer it or not answer it. If you've understood it and you're trying to show that you've not understood it, the audience is going to understand. So probably if you do not know the answer, it is better to be candid and confess that you do not know it. And most importantly, each time you go on stage, even if you don't do well, even if your previous presentation has not gone well, try and raise the bar of your talks by not only practicing, and practicing again, but also try and improve the quality of your presentation each time you go up on stage. Try and compare yourself with your previous past. And unless you have some sort of a standard or some sort of a bar, you can never cross it. So eventually, and this is essentially my last slide, is that when you need to give some sort of an output, when you need to present to an audience, may it be in an exam, may it be on a podium, national, international, may it be a case presentation, at the end of the day, an output can never happen, can never occur unless there is a scientific input and there is a process which you have done, which you have followed with a lot of zeal, with a lot of zest, and with a lot of information which is scientific. Only then and only when you put your heart, your mind, your body, and your soul into a presentation can you be successful. I thank you all for this audience, all this audience for your patient listening, your patient hearing me out for a lot of my concepts. Many of them may or may not appeal to you, may or may not be conventional, but this is the way I am. And this is the way I would uh, profess to making a presentation, because that is the way I have done it. Thank you so much, and would like to take any questions if there are.
So, is it okay if I ask a question? If
Absolutely, please.
okay, so this fantastic Swapnil sir. I think from my little experience I've attended a couple of international conferences in which this was a topic, especially for residents, on how to present international meetings, and especially scientific presentations. And I think 99% of what you said was exactly what the message I took out from that same level. So I feel really sorry how good this was. The only thing I can say is I feel really sorry for the guys who did not attend it. Probably if you have recorded it, they should they should consider this as a textbook of how to make a presentation. Uh, and I just would like to add a couple of more comments, if that's okay. First is that whenever we present in any of the meetings, what I typically try to do is, which is little unconventional, is I like to put a small photographs of all the authors who have contributed to the study, because it takes like so much effort into putting a study together to finally to get it published, or finally to put it in front of the world. So it's nice to kind of have a one slide, a 2-3 seconds of just photos of all the co-authors. So we should give the credit where it is due. Even if your junior has helped you in literature review, even if your residents have helped you, it is nice to kind of give them, because every next project they would have some kind of incentive to help you, because you know that this particular person gives you credit. So that's one thing I would say, like giving credit to your co-authors in initial slides could be something which I would add. Second thing I would probably add is a disclosure slide, which is very relevant, considering that this was about scientific literature. I would add a slide of disclosures of your relevant disclosures from your industry, because whatever talk you're gonna say, people are gonna pursue it based on if you have any conflict of interest, which was not in this talk, but that is what I would add. The final thing I would say, which I've learned so far from my experience, is that I like to include a final slide of, as Sir said, as a take-home message, which is a little, I would say, spiritual or psychological, as compared to a very scientific one. Like I would have a summary slide at the end of every presentation, as Sir exactly did that. That is, I'm just stressing on what Sir has exactly said, but it's so critically important, because when people come to you, half of them are in there looking in your phone, and half of them are when you know that the other person's video is off, you have no idea what they're doing. So it's critically important that the last slide is a summary slide, which critically tells you 3 to 5 points of what the whole presentation was about. Because people will listen to 100% of whatever you say. People are going to listen to 50%. They're going to register 10%, and they're going to take home 5%. So make sure that you put the gist of your talk in that summary slide in the end. And final slide should always be a take home message, just to give it a human touch, that what we are doing is, if my presentation is about a shoulder fracture or something like this, I would like to remind people that why we are doing this. Surgery is not the answer to everything. What is that we are here to help people, even in non-surgical way or something like this. So summary slide, take home message in the most psychological way would be just my approach, what I've learned. But Swapnil sir, hats off. Really good, really amazing, and look forward to future presentations like this.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Prashant. I think there are other members also of the research committee, and if they want to add, Dr. Kalpana is here, Dr. Mamta is here, Dr. Khade is here, Dr. Smita. I cannot see Dr. Nipti is around. Dr. Sangeeta is here. She's a senior teacher. I'm pretty certain that a lot of experience in teaching. So please, if you can add wisdom to the knowledge which we've shared. Yes, Dr. Sangeeta, you don't have to raise your hand. We all know you're number one always.
Very beautiful presentation, and like I fully agree with Dr. Mishram, it's a loss to people who have not actually, now is the right moment to attend a presentation. Recording होता रहेगा, बाद में कब देखेंगे वो अभी दूसरी बात है. But very well, you have really made it so crisp and clear the requirements of a presentation. Couple of things which I would like to add is, as in our medical sciences, somehow we have been looked upon by our patients as next to God if everything goes fine. But if something goes wrong, then we have faced the music as well on the other other end of the spectrum. So when we put our presentations, I as an audience, when I have listened to presenters, some quotes, Abdul Kalam or Aristotle or Martin Luther King, some such quotes which actually connect, there is a soul connect with the topic. To say that there is some spirit, supernatural, I don't know whether I'm speaking to a believer or a non-believer audience, but yes, there is some supernatural over and above our, efforts in, advances in sciences, presenting something new or a series of cases where we've tried some, some research work. So some quote which makes you a little, a little soulful about your presentation. Ultimately, it is that grace is needed, for a research, the presentation to be accepted by the audience, or maybe by people who are, they're sitting across, trying to make, judge your presentations. One is that, and second is, say if this is for residents, of course, if there's a slot given for 10 minutes, I would say you prepare for 8 minutes, because somewhere that 2 minutes is going to be lost anyways during the course of a presentation. So if you have a presentation of 20 minutes, if you're given a slot for 20, you prepare for about 17 minutes, 17 or 18. I'm sure Dr. Swapnil also will agree. Is somewhere these glitches and technical, these things of getting your presentation started, and then maybe if you have time, and if you're ready, then maybe you can keep the floor open for a Q&A session. So that was something which, otherwise a lovely presentation. Your slides were good. It really drove home your points, very nice. Good. I didn't miss it today.
Thank you. Dr. Mamta is there, Dr. Vinod.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And yes, like Dr. Sangeeta mentioned, it was really a good presentation. I'm sure all the residents and the people who are, in the crux of starting their careers, the residents and the juniors will have a lot to learn from this presentation that you have made, Dr. Swapnil, because you've touched upon all the important nitty-gritties of how good the presentation should be and what goes into making a good presentation and actually wowing your audience when you're up there on the stage, whether it's exam or on a conference platform or whatever. Now in today's day and age, because of Corona, the physical presentation unfortunately has taken a backseat, and most of the presentations are like how it's on today, online presentation on Zoom or whatever platform. I would like to just add that when you're doing this, make sure your background is all right. It shouldn't sort of contrast too much with your own get-up, in the sense you should have a kind of of course, if you have the opportunity of having a laptop with the latest technology, you can put a virtual background and do things like that. But otherwise, make sure your background is decent and clear, and without too many, walls and pillars and doors and windows and stuff like that. And also somewhere in the virtual media, the actual human touch, so to say, should not be lost in the sense, okay, you are interacting on a virtual media, but also remember, just because it's a virtual media, it should not lose that the contact or eye contact, so to say, like how Dr. Swapnil said. You need to relate to the audience and connect with them, whether it's a physical presentation or a virtual platform. And that's a great presentation again, and I'm sure everyone here would agree with that.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Vinod, would like to add? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very nice presentation. I think I also attended this type of presentation first time. I have attended many conferences, but this is like best of the thing I have found out.
Sir, any suggestions from
Thank
your
you.
side for the residents?
I'm not much capable of suggesting anything. Or Prashant has suggested quite good points.
Sir, if I may, is it okay if I have one comment and one question? Just is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So one comment I would like to make is something which I've learned from Dr. ABG sir, Goregaonkar sir, who's like the head of Department of Science of Orthopedics. He told me something which stuck with me. He's like, Prashant, any meeting you attend or any conference you go to, and this is very critical for residents, because I was told as a senior resident this. Make sure that you read about that topic at least for 10-15 minutes. Just have a quick Google search if you don't have time to kind of go through that topic, whatever topic it is. Just read the latest systematic review, or just go through Google and understand what the topic is about, and then you attend the presentation. And make sure you at least ask one question. Even if you go for at international stage, you go anywhere, be fearless, go and ask your question. It will help in two ways. Number one is that you would get noticed. People would know that you exist, number one. And number two, just because you have to ask a question, psychologically, you would pay so much attention and grasp everything which is being said in the presentation. So that is what I personally follow. It has absolutely changed the way I attend the meetings. So try to ask a question, one question at least at the end. So following that, I would like to ask one question to Dr. Swapnil sir. Is that because it's a virtual meeting platform where everyone meets, everyone meets with each other through computers nowadays. So what would you suggest would be an ideal background? Some people keep a background. So what should be like an ideal background? Because there's a lot of background, virtual backgrounds which Zoom provides. I have seen you using the Iron Bridge from San Francisco a lot, which a lot of people do. What would you suggest to be a good background to be? Just a stupid question, but yeah.
I don't know. Probably the one which I have right now. Whatever is available.
Whatever is available.
I think probably a virtual background. See, many a times we are not under the ideal circumstances. So what I tend to use is some sort of a picture which people can relate to. At the same time, it shouldn't be that the picture is trying to overshadow me or overpower me in any which ways,
Right.
which happens. Otherwise, something which is straight and plain is good enough.
Yeah, I feel the same. What I try to do is I try to have like a very plain background. Instead of a virtual background, I try to have like a plain wall behind me, so that all the focus is on the matter of the presentation and not just a painting behind me or something, some kind of jewelry or anything. You have to make sure that everything, all the focus, 100% focus is on the presentation. So yeah, good point. I promise no more questions.
So we have a few other faculty as well. I think Dr. Smita is there. If you have anything to share, I think Dr. Madhuri is also there. Dr. Vaibhav. Who else can I see? Dr. Purandare. Please add to wisdom to our knowledge if you can. Anybody for that matter. Dr. Amit Desai. Yeah.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah, like Dr. Meshram just suggested about a virtual background. The limitation with virtual background is the minute you move, then your margins disappear, your hair disappear, your fingers disappear. So if you want to have a interactive present which will not restrict your movements, I would suggest you avoid a virtual background I don't know whether there is any. I am a technologically challenged person, so I'm not aware that with a virtual background you can actually merge with the background. But I have noticed that in the last 1 year, the webinars that we attend, sometimes kahin suddenly kahin haath aa jata hai, kahin, So it is safer to have a normal regular wall than a virtual. And if you have virtual, then you cannot move. You have to sit very still. Then that makes very, sets in a monotony as far as the speaking is concerned. So if you have little gestures to make, or then I think a simple background, your wall would be the best thing. That was just a suggestion. You can throw some light on the technology regarding virtual background.
I think what ma'am says is very pertinent. I think that is really relevant today. I think we are just about in time. It's almost near 9. So may I now request Dr. Rini to again take over for the vote of thanks. Over to you, Dr. Rini.
Sir, it was a wonderful presentation. Like, it's indeed our pleasure that we could attend this live, and we'll urge other people to watch the recorded session, as it is going to be quite helpful to all our postgraduate residents as well as us teachers and other doctors too. Your slides were so simple yet so effective. It was quite motivating and inspiring talk indeed. I would like to thank administrator for their kind support and also the research committee for this great initiative. And thanks to all of you for this patient listening. Have a good evening, stay safe and take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good night to everybody.
Okay.